Good morning. Welcome to Books at the Bottom of the Stairs. My name's Lorene. I'm back at the bottom of the stairs, although I should probably still be upstairs in my room. I tried to get ready for this video and it meant a couple of times up and down the stairs and I'm wiped. So I think it's going to be a little bit short. Today's book that I'm bringing to you is my first classic of 2021. It is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. And this little edition comes from Pan Macmillan, and I just love it. I've talked about these before. I usually take the book jacket off, and so you still get a pretty book, but I tend to be, well, they just get moved around the house too much. I tend to read all over the house, so the books move with me. And it is about 600 pages of really tiny text. And I was reading part of this while I was in the hospital. Probably about a quarter of the book was while I was in the hospital. And not at my peak intellectual absorption rate, let's say. So I have a bit of a vague memory of those sections. I think that this book was pretty interesting. You know, classic, not really sure how to approach talking about a classic because it's been around forever. There's been all kinds of commentary on it, and this book includes an afterword. Oh, let me see. I didn't write down who. Catherine White. The afterword was really good. It didn't bring anything new to what I was reading except that it contextualized. So North and South starts out with the basic plot is that Margaret Hale is the daughter of a vicar in the Church of England who comes across some kind of theological, the vicar comes across some kind of theological sticking point, and he feels that he needs to leave the Church of England and therefore the vicarage. So they move from this bucolic setting of sort of lazy, easy, kind of rural idyll. And they go to Milton, which is the complete opposite. It's a mill town, primarily with the processing and production of cotton goods. And it's the opposite. It's foggy, it's dank, it's stinky. The people are much more rushed. Everybody's kind of on an agenda. And they, the Hales, Margaret Hale and her family, are not fitting in very well because not only do they have their rural expectations that they've brought with them, but they've got expectations around class. So this is a community of tradespeople, and tradespeople are just not the thing. So how, like, before you even walk into the community, you've completely dismissed 95% of its inhabitants as just, you know, not your thing. So the Hales find themselves pretty isolated, and ex-vicar dad has decided he's going to be a tutor to about the classics, and a lot of these tradespeople have not been able to go on to higher education. So some of the mill owners are having their sons educated on the side while they're still working in the mills and, you know, getting ready to take over the family business. So that's kind of the background. Mrs. Hale becomes more of an invalid as the story progresses, and Margaret is the center around which the story circulates. So over the course of this transition, they bump into Mr. John Thornton, who is a mill owner and consequently not, you know, just the right stuff. But he and Margaret come to loggerheads almost instantly, partly because she's just such a wretched snob. I would say that her snobbishness is definitely the weakest, second weakest point of Margaret's character, but that's deliberate on the author's agenda. She's, you know, that's half the reason. If you don't have something to, you know, crack heads against, you don't have much of a plot. The second character flaw for me, for Margaret, is that she's such a saint. She's just this paragon of virtue. She's always sacrificing herself in order to meet the needs of others. Having, you know, done that as a stay-at-home mom, I certainly know the impulses to just always look out for other people's needs and then sort of all of a sudden realize, whoa, I have, you know, not looked after myself for a long time. So that's part of Margaret's journey, as well as this John Thornton fellow. Well, what are they in conflict about? Margaret, as a do-gooder, really aches on behalf of the worker. She doesn't really have a sense of the economies. She doesn't have a sense of industry. She has a sense of humanity. And John Thornton is the opposite. He's got a sense of machinery and economics and the power struggle within the mills for competition. And he doesn't really see the workers as human. I mean, yes, he sees them as human, but they are essential. They're dispensable. And so they should be grateful for the work. And what happens is we also meet a third family, the Higgins, Nicholas Higgins and his daughter Bessie. Bessie has come up with consumption aggravated by working in the mills, and in the cotton sorting area, the fluff comes up and the workers inhale the fluff. So if you've got any kind of a chest condition, which you would if you were poor because you're having poor nutrition and poor circulation of air and so forth, you walk into this mist of cotton fluff and you're just doomed. So I can't exactly remember how the Higginsons and Margaret meet, but they do. And Margaret starts to form a bond with Bessie to begin with, and then Father Nicholas Higgins. And the Higgins represent the workers and the point of view of the union and the point of view of why, if you take your workforce seriously in terms of seeing them as a valuable, these are modern words now, if you see your workforce as a modern commodity, you're going to treat them as better because they're not really indispensable. And we witness this when there's a strike and the people who are skilled workers are gone out of work and not doing any production at all for a significant amount of time, and the mill owners bring in the Irish who are untrained, and the mill owners just like haven't clued into the fact that it takes skill and to do the work in the mills. They just think any old body can do it. Well, in a way that's true, but there's a lot of you lose a lot of productivity if you have to keep training and training. So we've got the union's point of view, we've got the mill owner's point of view, and we've got Margaret's humanities point of view. And they're circling around each other, and as the story progresses and as Margaret pushes on all the different pieces, they start to come together, and if there isn't agreement, there is at least awareness. And I think that's maybe the first step in Elizabeth Gaskell's agenda behind this book. It's posed both as a love story, has an awful lot of sort of Pride and Prejudice tensions between the two male and female protagonists, but it is more what's called a social, what do they call it now? It is called a social novel, and it is an expose on the mills and on the unions. It's an improving book. It's a long book. It's 600 pages in that tiny text in that tiny book. It was a long haul. I think the third quarter of the book could have been condensed pretty much. We'd already come across all the exposés that Elizabeth Gaskell wanted to reveal, and she's kind of setting up, the third quarter of the book is setting up for the ending. And I think what has happened, just because of the writing world, the publishing world of Elizabeth Gaskell's time, this North and South was presented as a serial through, Charles Dickens had a magazine called Household Words. So the reading audience is getting this in, I don't know if it was weekly or monthly, I'm not sure, but they're getting it in installments. And so I think the afterword talks about this a little bit. I think that Elizabeth Gaskell is sort of losing track of the plot, and the way you write for a weekly publication is not how you would write for a book. So she was better at novel writing, and or that's what the experts say. And I think that third quarter, just not only is it about just meeting the demands of the magazine and kind of losing the thread a little bit, it's also about earning money. So I think that's kind of why I found it was the weakest part of the book, because we're just repeating old ground, and the only thing that changes is this sort of, it's not really a red herring, it's kind of this long distance carrot, and that is the brother Frederick, who has been, there's a whole story behind Frederick, and I won't tell you just because, we want to save some kind of surprises for the reader, you. Frederick comes into the story and leaves the story, and there is quite a lot of tension around that. And Margaret and John Thornton actually, I guess basically that's sort of the explosion point of their relationship. And so then we are kind of dealing with how Margaret needs to exit Milton and come to the next stage of her life. Geez, how do you talk about that without giving it away? I guess, let's just say there's an extreme change in Margaret's circumstances in the third quarter of the book. The last quarter of the book is trying to bring all those threads together, the awareness point of the union in the mill and the humanity part. And then somewhere along the way, while I was reading about the background about this novel, it was mentioned that Charles Dickens told Elizabeth Gaskell that she needed to rewrite the last 4 chapters. And I am really curious to see what she did with the original 4 chapters, because the last 4 chapters here, yeah, they're silly. They make a whole lot of things work in a Disney-esque kind of a way. It's a happily ever after ending. This is not a happily ever after book. There's quite a lot of acknowledgement of the, well, the conditions of their times. It's, unless you're super, super wealthy, you can ignore a whole lot of the things, but there's just all kinds of problems rife in that late Victorian era, 1854, 1855. I don't know my British history that well, so let's just say Victorian post-industrial revolution moment. And there's a lot of tension between classes. There's a lot of environmental issues around air pollution and water pollution. So we see the effects of that throughout the book, but then in the last quarter of the book, everything starts to become glossy and shiny again. And I think that had more to do with the reader's expectations and Charles Dickens' expectations, as opposed to what Elizabeth Gaskell was kind of inclined to do. Just, I feel that she kind of, again, lost her intentionality. Terrible word. She lost her intentions towards the end of the book. So I found that it was a bit of a hard slog to finish it. I'm glad to have read it. I think that it solidified for me a lot of the information that was kind of rolling around in my head anyways. But yeah, it was a good book. I enjoy it. I won't reread it. It was too darn long, but I'm still on an Elizabeth Gaskell fan base. The next one I'm hoping to read is her ghost stories in October. She's got a whole edition of ghost stories that I'm hoping to find and read. And she's got a couple of others. She actually wrote a fair amount. Let me see. She wrote at the same time as Wilkie Collins, who's another writer that I haven't read yet. So she's written Mary Barton, Ruth, Cranford, which I did read. She wrote a biography of Charlotte Bronte, which has had mixed reviews. Sylvia's Lovers, and Wives and Daughters. So there's still a few books to go. I think she's also got some short stories that are not ghost stories. So that's my Elizabeth Gaskell plan, but I'm not in any hurry. I think 1 a year, maybe 2 a year is probably a good game plan. But also, if it's possible, I'm going to try and get it in these little editions. I haven't looked that carefully, but I do love these. Okay, so that's it for me this week, and I hope all your reading dreams and adventures continue to come true. And I should see you next week with hopefully, I think I will have my book club readings accomplished, and we can talk about 4 different books. Thank you, and goodbye.